Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. He was one of the most influential jurists of his generation, a wonderful dinner companion, a dedicated family man, and a devout Catholic. Justice Antonin Scalia's passing on Saturday left a void in the court and also in the lives of many friends and family. Earlier this week, I spoke to U.S. District Court Judge Martin Feldman from New Orleans about his dear friend and godfather, Antonin Scalia. Take a listen. Judge Feldman, tell me, how did you learn of the passing of Nino Scalia this week?
Oh, by accident, I happened to turn on one of the TV news stations that afternoon, and there was his face on the TV screen, and I thought to myself, oh, goodness, now what has he done? And it took about 5 minutes I was so stunned to realize that that he had passed away. But just by accident, I later spoke with Mrs. Scalia. She called me later that evening, but I just learned by accident on the TV news.
Now, you all were very close. You were friends for more than 30 years. Tell me how you first met. He drove up to the front of your house one day. That's
right. My late wife and I were involved with a program at Tulane University called Directions. And this was April of 1984. And Directions for that year always had a theme, and they always had what I teasingly later told him was a Big Shots panel. And he was on the D.C. Court of Appeals. I had just been appointed to the district court. And the other two panelists, he was one of the panelists, the other two panelists were the famous law professor Arthur Miller and Fred Friendly, who was chairman of CBS News.
Right.
And Tulane asked my late wife and I to give the Big Shots party at my house. And they were all there except for Nino. And I got kind of bored and I walked out on the front porch because I don't really like crowds. And this beat-up little car pulled up, and this guy got out and walked up, and his first words to me were, Judge Feldman, and I said, Judge Scalia, and we became instant friends. In fact, my wife was very angry with me because he and I both ignored everybody else at the party, and we just went off into a corner and became instant friends.
Now, in your chambers in New Orleans, you even have a room dedicated to him with some historical significance. Tell us about that.
I do. It was, I want to say 2001 now. It was the Kylo decision involving whether or not flying over your house and doing thermal imaging for drugs and marijuana was an unreasonable search and seizure. And he happened to be visiting me in New Orleans and was staying at my house. And he said he had some work to do. And could he come to chambers? Well, I had a little extra conference room where he could work, and I said, we'll go to lunch when you finish. And about 11:30, I went in to see him, and we were going to go to Galatoire's, and you're familiar with one of our famous restaurants here. And I went in to the little conference room, and he was typing away on his laptop, and I said, what time do you want to go to lunch? I was just standing in the doorway, and he said, let me finish this, and we'll go. And so I said, what are you working on? And he said, I can't tell you. You're not going to agree with me, but I will send you a copy of the decision the minute it comes out. And when I first started reading the decision, I didn't agree with him until I got to his footnote about the 18th century history of search and seizure. And typical of him, he convinced me.
I want to talk about his faith for a moment, Judge, and I know it had an influence on your personal journey.
Yes.
This is a quote from Antonin Scalia, Justice Scalia, I want to share with the audience. This is from 2005. He was speaking at a Knights of Columbus Council. He said, God assumed from the beginning that the wise of the world would view Christians as fools, and he has not been disappointed. If I have brought any message today, it is this: have the courage to have your wisdom regarded as stupidity. be fools for Christ, and have the courage to suffer the contempt of the sophisticated world. How did that expression of faith influence you, and was it instrumental in your personal conversion?
Yes. I had been, not to be personal because this is about Justice Scalia, but ever since I was a teenager, I had been drawn to the church. And he knew it, and Maureen knew it, and so Nino would send me books, and we would talk for years and years. And I have always felt, it's ironic that you bring up that quote, because I was teasing him at lunch when the Pope was in D.C. I was in D.C. and we were at lunch. And I said to him, you know, if you had lived 2,000 years ago, you would have disagreed with Jesus, but you would have eventually become one of the apostles. And I still believe that.
And did what of his faith, as a jurist yourself, did it affect, was there any reticence on your part of officially joining the Catholic Church? Because Antonin Scalia was often wrapped, some say his faith preceded his judgment and was part of his judgment, that he brought that to the bench with him. Was that a concern for you at all? And is that a fair criticism of Justice Scalia?
I think it's fair to say that we all look at issues through whatever background prism we relate to. We still strive mightily, and he certainly did, to be fair and impartial. And I think that he was always able to remain immensely faithful to his faith, but also to his obligations as a judge. And there, as you know, there are many instances throughout his history as a judge and on the Supreme Court where he did not go along with the so-called conservative mindset. He had a kind of a libertarian streak in him. So, no, he had a great influence on me and on my faith, but I don't think that he ever felt conflicted, and I certainly have never felt conflicted.
And he was your godfather, which a lot of folks didn't know.
About 10 years ago, when I finally decided that I was going to be baptized, I was going to make official what had been unofficial most of my life. I called him, and I said, "All right, I'm going to be baptized. I'm going to study for it. Will you be my godfather?" And he said, "Marty, I have been trying to get into heaven all my life, and you're going to slip in right ahead of me." And that's how he agreed to be godfather to me.
You spent time with him at dinners with Justice Sotomayor, Justice Breyer. I know you spoke with some of them in the wake of Justice Scalia's passing. What did they say about his role on the court and how he'll be missed?
Well, he was beloved. He went out of his way to be friendly socially with Justice Breyer, who said to me yesterday that a glow in the court has grown dim. He had Justice Sotomayor and me to dinner at his house with just him and Maureen. He was an incredibly beloved colleague. And you knew where you stood with him. He never minced words. As you know, Justice Ginsburg has been his closest friend for decades. They probably didn't agree that they were even friends. But they remained friends even though they didn't agree on most issues.
Judge Feldman, give me a sense of his influence in those weekly conferences. And does that in any way inordinately tip the balance of the court? Because I know Justice Scalia was so demonstrative, so willing to engage and have a debate. I imagine he had great influence in those conferences where all the justices sit and sort of hash out the cases.
Well, I'm going to disappoint you and the audience, because he never, ever revealed a secret of the court to me. Not ever. We would talk about issues, but he never told me what went on in conference. He never told me about conversations with other justices regarding cases pending before the court. I knew a lot about his relationships with the justices socially. I knew a lot about what he thought of some of them and what he didn't think of some, which I'm not going to repeat here.
Okay.
But he never once ever violated the oath of secrecy and privacy of the court's conferences.
Judge Feldman, before I let you go, your final thoughts on his lasting influence, particularly as the vanguard of originalism, cleaving to what the Constitution prescribed and interpreting accordingly.
Well, I don't know whether he'll be remembered for his opinions in the majority or his very powerful dissents. But I think what will have a profound influence on the law and our society as a whole is quite simply how much sense he made, how his opinions and the language he used were pure poetry, in rhythm, in visualness, in power, and in emotion. And I think that when history looks back on him, history will remember him for being the justice who made the most sense.
Judge Feldman, thank you so much for being here and for remembering this man who, in addition to his great legacy that he left on the court, personally, he was an hilarious and forthright dinner companion and a really good man and a good father.
I will leave you with just one thought about how beloved he was. He invited Justice Sotomayor and me to dinner at their house one night out in McLean, and she picked me up, and we drove out there and pulled up in front of the house, and we got out of her car, and I rang the doorbell. He came to the door, he opened the door, and he looked at the two of us, and he said, "Ah, the odd couple."
Well, we'll leave it there. A perfect way to end the segment. Judge Marty Feldman, thank you so much for joining us from New Orleans and for your reflections on your friend, and our deepest sympathies to you and, of course, to the Scalia family.
Thank you for having me.